Yeah, I guess I'll start with I do think that the Bears will probably draft Caleb Williams, although it seems like between now and then there's a lot of rumors about different quarterbacks and what they'll do. I just feel like it's going to be Caleb. So then that leads to what you just asked, which is what happens with Fields. It's hard to project right now, guys, because so many dominoes kind of have to fall in place. The quarterback market feels like Kirk Cousins, he's not holding this process hostage. It just started, but we have to see where he lands first, especially because some of the teams that might be in the running for him, particularly Atlanta, are ones that would otherwise be associated with Fields. And if he does go to Atlanta, that takes one of, I think, the most likely suitors out. Then you're looking at, potentially the Raiders, the Steelers, although, we just heard that Russell Wilson was there, obviously. So it's kind of like musical chairs, and every quarterback going to have to sit down, but Kirk Cousins has to go first before we have a clearer picture.
Mina, are you surprised that the market for Justin Fields may not be as hot as he thought, or the Bears thought, or maybe the entire NFL universe thought?
I'm a little surprised, given that personally, I think he has more upside than, say, Russell Wilson, right? But I think that what we're seeing is, and this is maybe something we probably should have projected, the teams that would consider him are reluctant for the same reason that the Bears were reluctant, which is you trade for him and then you got to pick up the option immediately, right? Yeah. So it's not like if it was a year ago, say, I think even though he was not coming off of great performances, it would have been potentially a more robust market given the contract status.
How do you feel he played last year? Did you see tangible progress, and how much progress?
I definitely did see progress. I think that the problem is it just didn't feel linear, and I'm sure that folks inside of the Bears facility would agree, and that's what's been so frustrating with Fields. There were performances, even going back to his first season, where you saw why he was drafted where he was, not just, obviously, he's one of the more dynamic runners in the NFL, but just such a beautiful deep ball at times, too. I thought he threw really well to the intermediate part of the field. Short was more inconsistent. But then it would be kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back with him, and raise questions about, has the process, sped up enough for him, still holding on to the football a little bit too long, still a little bit inconsistent on the short stuff. So, those are questions I think that other teams are asking, too.
Mina Kimes joining us. It's Waddle and Sylvie on ESPN 1000. Your name first came up when the Bears hired Shane Waldron because you root for the Seahawks, and we wanted to talk to you about your thought, especially from a fan standpoint, because I don't know if a fan ever loves their offensive coordinator. So what was your thought of watching Waldron call offenses for your favorite team for the last 3 years?
Well, I think the sentiment around him in Seattle was better than Chicago. So I'll say there with your offensive coordinator, which was very interesting with the Raiders and Fields. I thought he did a good job. It was interesting because there was some shared DNA with the Rams offense coming from working for Sean McVay. But I also thought he did some different things in terms of the way he used personnel in Seattle. They were one of the heavier 12 and 13 personnel teams. They used a lot of 13 with the 3 tight ends in the league. I actually think that's probably going to continue. The way he deployed those tight ends, often rolling out some interesting formations. I thought he was really good with run-pass balance, sequencing plays. The offense didn't run the ball well, but I wouldn't put that on him per se. I thought, the offensive line struggled with run blocking a bit. So I'm excited to see what he does with the backs you guys have, who I think are quite talented.
Speaking of running backs, the value of 4 running backs has changed, obviously, over the course of time. Do you believe that we may have hit a point where teams, especially with most teams having the extra $30 million to spend with the rise in the salary cap, do you think that there may be some teams willing to spend a little bit more on the running back position this year?
I think in a way, because I think this is not a particularly great running back draft, and there's just so many good veterans hitting free agency. But because there are so many good veterans hitting free agency, that should also depress their value, right? Because it's a market. To me, what I think is optimal, and you're seeing, around the league, teams like Detroit, Miami, is sort of that two-track committee where you have an experienced running back on, not a super expensive contract, and then maybe pair him with a mid-round rookie. Obviously, Detroit had the first rounder in Gibbs, but in Miami, I think they did that with Achane, his third rounder, and I like that pairing, and I like Chicago. I like I said, I mentioned, I think Khalil Herbert's one of the more underrated backs in the league, to be honest, and the pairing of him and Roschon Johnson, to me, I don't really think that's a position you need to upgrade at.
So yeah, because that was my next point. We had been talking for the last couple of days. Jason McKee had talked about Jacobs, that there's possibly mutual interest there, or Barkley. So you would not go into that market if you were the Bears.
I would not. I think your backs are good. I feel like there's other. You have a lot of money, so obviously, when you have that much cap space, a lot of things are on the table. But there's just a lot of other positions I would prioritize for Chicago on both sides of the ball over running back.
Could I interest you in Austin Eckler as a member of the Chicago Bears, bringing a different element that Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, that they don't bring to the offense?
I know you would like to, have more of that pass-catching option, I guess, but it would have to be a pretty affordable contract.
Right.
Eckler's performance last year was definitely on the downturn, and I really think you got two ascending players.
How about on the defensive side? The Bears, as you mentioned, Mina, have a ton of cap space.
Yep.
They gave Sweat a $100 million deal. Would you think that Ryan Poles would be more inclined to spend money on the three technique, whether it was Christian Wilkins or if they tried to pry, Chris Jones out of Kansas City, which I don't think is going to happen? Or do you think that they'd be more likely to spend on the edge with someone like Danielle Hunter?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I probably would. It's not just about those players, right? It's about what do you see in the draft and who are the other options available. And defensive tackle, to me, like a player like Christian Wilkins, who I think would be an excellent fit for Matt Eberflus's defense, because he's so complete, he's so good. He's not just that sort of penetrating three tech, but he's also really, really solid against the run. I think he would allow them to play light boxes, stop the run more often too. I kind of like what he would do paired with maybe a cheaper edge rusher. This is a very deep group of free agent edge rushers. Yes, Danielle Hunter, who you guys know all too well, is certainly the cream of the crop, but you don't have to go much farther down to find pretty solid value. And I think you could get potentially Christian Wilkins and then maybe like one of those edge rushers to pair with Sweat, who I'm such a fan of his game. I don't think personally that you need to spend big at that position.
Do you think that there are going to be some teams that are looking to make big moves on draft day to move up to draft quarterbacks?
I absolutely do, yeah. Coming out of Indianapolis, that was, I think, just the hottest topic of conversation, whether or not either Washington, which surprised me, or New England would be willing to part with those picks. But I also heard, and this is what actually surprised me even more, a lot of whispers about teams moving up to 5, trying to leapfrog the Giants to take the likes of J.J. McCarthy. The wisdom of that, we can debate. But I do think there's going to be a lot of movement on draft day because there are so many teams that do need a quarterback.
And because the Bears have 9 and the Bears can use another wide receiver to pair with DJ Moore, do you believe that one of the 3, I should say one of the 2 or 3, because we know Harrison's going to be gone, but do you think Neighbors or Odunze would fall to the Bears at 9?
I thought so, but man, I keep not only seeing mock drafts, but hearing that both of those receivers are gonna be drafted real high, and so obviously, to your point, it would be very helpful to Chicago. The more quarterbacks taken in the top 8, the better, or offensive tackles. But the sense I get around the league is that people do view it as like a very clear top 3 at receiver, and actually there's some difference of opinion about the order of those receivers. And unfortunately for Chicago, there are of the teams above them, you could really, almost all of them could use one of those receivers. So I think it's going to be pretty dicey.